Driving school teachers, what are the most outrageous things student drivers have done while with you? I used to work as a receptionist at a driving school and got to see the before and after for students and their parents. So many stories, but the two that come to mind that always flabbergasted me were: 1. A mom telling her daughter to always go 10 miles under the speed limit, no matter what, right before her driving test. So if the speed limit is 25, she should go 15 and so on. I had to explain that, unless conditions required her to go slower than speed limit, weather, traffic, etc., she becomes more of a hazard if she is going under speed limit all the time. I'm all for driving safe, but there are better ways to go about it. To the girl who got in an accident on her driving test that she caused, I believe she ran a red that had been red for a while and hit a car that had right of way in front of a cop. She did not understand why she failed and tried to argue about it and schedule an appointment for the same day to retake. I know this slower safer mentality too well. I grew up with my mom merging on the autobahn while barely accelerating. My driving teacher asked me what the duck I was doing and told me I should stay in third, floor it and shift close to red line to be at least at the same speed as the trucks. And the speed recommendation of 130 means you should do approximately 130, not 80, 90, because being constantly overtaken by trucks is way more dangerous. Learned the same in Denmark. You need to be up to speed by the time you leave the on-ramp. I hate people who enter the highway 10, 20, 30 miles per hour slower than the speed limit and slowly get up to cruising speed. It is super unsafe. I do not have a lot of road rage, but this is the one thing that makes me livid. When the interstate has a speed limit of 70 miles per hour and flow of traffic is 80 miles per hour, you cannot safely merge at 45 miles per hour. You just cannot. Even if flow of traffic is going the actual speed limit, you still cannot safely merge going that slow. I absolutely hate getting stuck behind people like that on the entrance ramps. BC, their bad driving puts me in a dangerous situation too, because now I cannot get up to speed either. I know a guy who used to give the final exams for people contesting suspensions of their driver's license with the DMV. He had horror stories to tell me about how bad drivers were. He had multiple stories about students not even making it out of the parking lot before failing and losing their licenses permanently. But the best was when a woman was backing out of the parking space too quickly and hit a car behind her. He turns to the driver and tells her to park back in the space. She guns it and hits the DMV building itself. She then turns to him and asks, "Did I pass?" He said it was the shortest test of his career. I had an instructor who was famous for never using his teacher's brake even when he should. I was riding in the back seat when another student was merging onto the freeway for the first time. The kid is looking over his shoulder and concentrating. He is determined to make the merge and never looked forward as he accelerated down the ramp. We drifted off the side and hit the snowbank at 50 miles per hour. Snow was roaring over the hood, and we ground to a stop buried to the top of the windshield, with an orange student driver sign sticking out the top. The kid was shaking and gripping the wheel with white knuckles when the teacher says, as calmly as can be, "You ought to look forward once in a while when you go down the ramp." Damn. That instructor was committed to proving his point. I wonder if he was just ready to die. If he was a driving instructor for more than a year, yeah, he was ready to die. I'm not an instructor, but occasionally babysit new drivers' trucks, buses. In the UK, part of the larger vehicle tests are conducted in a yard before leaving to do the on-road part of the examination. These parts are observed by the examiner from outside the vehicle and include a reversing exercise and emergency stop. In short, bus test candidate knocked over the examiner during the emergency stop, sending him and his clipboard flying a few meters onto tarmac. Luckily he was not seriously hurt, but everybody from then on used to make an exaggerated stand the hell back motion whenever this part of the test happened. Part of the UK motorcycle test used to be sending you around the block. Then the tester would crouch down hiding behind a parked vehicle. As you rode around the block, they would leap out at the last minute to simulate a surprise pedestrian to test your braking reflexes. If you scared the tester by almost hitting them, you failed. My uncle knew about this part of the test, so he rode around the block slowly and extra carefully. So slowly when he reached the starting point he found his tester lying on the road clutching his testicles after jumping out in front of the wrong motorcyclist, who obviously had not expected this, so they did not brake in time and parked their bike between the tester's legs. The tester had his testers tested instead of testing the testee. Unfortunate. You have a way with words. Nearly had my left foot peg taken off by a red Porsche 911, which was weaving through traffic at high speed on the highway during my final motorcycle license exam. I figured I insta-failed because I was changing lanes into him, and an unsafe lane change is grounds for failure. I did shoulder check before changing lanes, but the dude was going so fast he was not in my line of sight yet. I passed. Not a nearly failed, but I passed my riding test at 18 or 19. I forget, and when riding the instructor's bike back to her lockup on country roads, I went round a blind corner, met a combine harvester, crossing the road on the other side, blades up, could not brake in time, just went between the front and the edge of the road, nearly turned myself into shredded cabbage at 19. Just hear the instructor via headset as she stopped in time. Taller bike. Think she saw it over the hedgerows. Are you okay? Cue me pulling into the lockup 2 minutes later, sitting on the floor and not being able to stand up for the next 20 minutes. And that's why my friends called me boring for never racing my GSX R600 around country lanes with them. Duck that. I wanted to live. I rode 10 years before swapping to a car and never had an accident. Driving in the rain was what did it for me. I only have a small 50cc bike, but it can go up to 65 kilometers per hour. I was on my way to work one morning and it rained the whole night. Suddenly someone in front of me did an emergency brake and I did not notice in time as I was still fairly sleepy. I managed to get my bike to the left. Luckily the road had a left turn lane there and slid past the last car and the car in front of it. Turned left into the gas station and almost shat my pants. I came to work 5 minutes too late as I had to calm down for a moment there. When I took my driving test about 50 years ago we had to parallel park. It was the last part of the test. The testing station was in a strip mall that had some cars parked parallel along the edges. The tester told me go ahead and do the parallel parking portion. I did it between two of the cars parked along the edges. Only after I successfully parked did the instructor say, "You were supposed to do it between the orange cones over there, but you were doing so well I thought I would just let it go." Well, if it works it works. I used to live in Paris as a teenager. People there drive wildly. I was taking the final exam. I was super focused on not making mistakes when some crazy driver just purposely missed a stop sign and rushed in front of me. The examiner had to do an emergency brake, which usually is a major mistake. I thought that's it. I am ducked. And then he opened the window, flipped at the other car while yelling some rich words at him. Then calmly told me, "Parisian are holes. Continue please." And I passed. Same experience here, but during student driving practice, I was getting ready to get in a right turn lane that did not exist for another 20 feet or so, and some lady came flying around me or tried to in the bike parking lane. I did not see her do it, but the instructor slammed on the brakes, then rolled down the window and screamed at this woman for getting over too early. I remember she just looked like a deer in headlights. She was caught. Then he was back to his normal, calm self and we drove on. This never happened to me while I was doing driver's ed, but my teacher said some people will do that. So always check blind spots and be aware that some people are ducking idiots. Student ran over a gray squirrel, stopped the car, got out and got it, brought it back to the car and asked if she could bring it to a veterinary's office. My first behind the wheel. My instructor tried to tell me that if I were faced with a squirrel in the road and in a lot of traffic, I should run over the squirrel to avoid an accident. I told him that I hated that idea, so he told me I could instead keep good distance from the cars behind me to try to give myself time to brake for squirrels. I have a rule about squirrels in the road. Do not swerve to miss them. They are just as likely to dart the other direction and get run over anyway. I have not hit a squirrel in over 20 years that way. Kinda of like in NASCAR. If there is a crash in front of you, aim for it, and it will have moved out of your way by the time you get there. My instructor told us of a girl who drove into a mural, a Lawali coyote, because one of her eyes was legally blind and she thought it was the road. Turns out depth perception is important after all. Not a teacher, but one time in a driver's ed class this girl was driving and ran over a loud, clunky manhole cover that thumped. She was always nervous when it was her turn to drive. I guess she didn't see it coming because she screamed and goes, "What was that?" The teacher looks back and goes, "Oh god, it's a dog. Oh god, he is flopping. We gotta go back and finish him off." Stuff like that, while the girl descends into a kind of jittery sobbing. Anyways, she threw up in our school driver's ed car and we had to keep using it anyways. A whole spring semester of puke smell in 5th period. I could not help but laugh at that. We gotta go back and finish him off, laughing my butt off. Right. It's awful. Especially since the poor girl was sobbing. But also this. It's hilarious. I had a student so excited to drive that when he opened the door to get in he hit himself in the forehead with the door and cut himself so bad I had to drive him to the hospital to get stitches. Same thing happened to me once going into a library. Me about libraries. I taught mostly foreign students studying in the US. I have lots of stories. The first is about the mid-30s woman from Bangladesh. We are driving around a suburban neighborhood getting acclimated to making 90-degree turns. Pretty low-key, not scary stuff. Her phone rings, so she stops in the middle of the road to reach her purse in the backseat to answer her call. I informed her she must first pull to the side of the road as you cannot just stop in the middle of the street. She told me I could not tell her what to do. The second one was a woman in her late 20s from Saudi Arabia. She was graduating college in 3 weeks and wanted to go home with a deal as women could not drive in her country. I go to pick her up and I ask the standard, "Have you ever driven before?" She replied she knew what she was doing. 3 minutes in I ask her again because she was performing like this was her first time behind the wheel. She then stated that she had watched her family driver many times from her vantage point in the backseat. I made her pull over and I drove her to an empty parking lot. She was just not getting it after about 4 actual hours in the car with me on multiple days, but she insisted I take her to the licensing bureau for her driving test. I had no choice but to take her, even though I knew she would fail. They call her name and off she goes with the testing person. 7 minutes later the tester walks through the door and straight up to me. She said the woman had about taken out a school bus and that she, the tester, had to grab the wheel to keep them out of the ditch. I was asked for advance warning if I ever returned with such a bad driver. Now I'm curious what the fatality rate is for driving instructors and exam proctors. When I was learning to drive, the instructor told us a story. It was recent, like within a few months prior, of a student who, in a car with the instructor and 3 other students, made a left on red. They all died. So it definition happens. My driver instructor once clearly hungover, but on a Pink Floyd CD, and had me drive around country roads for 50 minutes while he had a nap. I've got a similar sort of one, but on my actual test, she entered the car completely stinking of weed, and I swear she wasn't even paying attention to my driving. Every time I looked over she was ducking about with her pen or the air conditioning. She still failed me, lol. What the hell did she fail you over? Driving with an intoxicated person in the vehicle, lol. Who knows? Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.